Hey there guys, I am the Sixth Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. So I wanted to keep going through the Dark Angels units and characters as we've been doing because, well, I really enjoy it and you guys seem to really like them. So first off, thank you very much for that. It is really appreciated to know that you guys are fans of the videos that I'm putting out. And today I wanted to dive into another character, this one a long time favourite of mine in the lore, although I will admit I'm not so much a fan of the model, but today we're going to be taking a look at the Master of the Deathwing, Belial. As always, we'll be taking a look at his stat line, his abilities, his rules, his war gear, and then trying to decide if he is a worthwhile addition to your Dark Angels army. At 140 points or 7 power, Belial isn't exactly cheap as far as HQs go, and his stat line is reasonably decent, but honestly nothing super exciting. He has a relatively slow 5-inch move, and as you would expect, 2-up weapon and ballistic skill, strength and toughness of 4, a decent 6 wounds, 4 attacks, and obviously being a Terminator HQ, a 2-up save. There really is nothing here that stands out as being particularly exceptional. It's decent pretty much across the board, with the obvious exception that his movement is a little below average. Although, as you might expect, he does have ways to help mitigate this. As far as his abilities go, we first of course come to Angels of Death. You're probably tired of hearing this by now, but surprise surprise, there is no benefit from And They Shall Know No Fear. However, the rest of them are actually quite decent for Belial. Bolter Discipline means that as a Terminator, he is always able to take advantage of rapid fire and fire 4 shots even at 24 inches with his Storm Bolter. Shock Assault gives him that extra attack when he charges, gets charged or heroically intervenes, popping him up to a very tasty 5 attacks, and as we will see, he is fairly nasty in combat, so that extra attack is a very welcome addition to his profile. And then of course with Combat Doctrines, although he has no heavy weapons, during Tactical and Assault Doctrines he does have weapons which both benefit from that extra -1 AP. As a Dark Angel, his Grim Resolve rule, like with most other HQs for the Dark Angels, actually won't make a huge difference as he is already 2+ to hit, so that extra +1 for not moving will only really have an effect if you are up against an enemy that has a -1 to hit aura or ability. The Dark Angels Super Doctrine, Sons of the Lion, however, as a member of the Deathwing and Inner Circle, means that Belial does gain the benefit from the Implacable ability, which means that in the Assault Doctrine, not only is his sword getting that extra point of AP as we mentioned, but each time he makes a melee attack against an enemy character or a unit with a model that has 8 or more wounds, he is re-rolling his wound rolls, which honestly massively bumps up the damage potential that he can throw down. And as I've said many times before, whilst Grim Resolve isn't always the best chapter tactic for Dark Angel HQs, the Sons of the Lion Super Doctrine does genuinely add a lot of powerful and useful abilities to their repertoire that, in my opinion, most often makes up for the somewhat lackluster usefulness of +1 to hit on a model that will probably already have a 2-up weapon and ballistic skill. In addition to that, he of course has Rights of Battle, like other captains, granting friendly Dark Angels core units within 6 inches reroll hit rolls of 1, and much like Samael, he has a semi-Chapter Master style ability, funnily enough called Grand Master of the Deathwing, that allows you to select a friendly Deathwing core or character unit in your command phase and grant them full rerolls. Although it is more restrictive than the general Chapter Master rule, seeing as how for people like Samael and Belial, you are likely going to be taking them alongside a good amount of Ravenwing or Deathwing models, it does effectively make it just as strong as if they did have the full Chapter Master rule, as 99% of the time you are going to be wanting to put it on a Ravenwing or a Deathwing unit anyway. And let's be honest, if there isn't a friendly Deathwing unit within 6 inches of Belial to put this on, then let's be fair, you're probably not winning the battle anyway. Belial also has the Inner Circle rule, which gives him the fantastically useful can never be wounded on less than a 4-up that we all know and love, and which on a Terminator armored HQ that likes to get up close and personal with the enemy is unbelievably strong. It does have the downside that as a member of the Deathwing, he can't choose to fall back against the Fallen, and even against other units, he has to roll equal to or under his leadership to be able to fall back. It's honestly not the worst downside in the world, as Belial does have a solid leadership of 9, but it's worth taking note of in case you do need to fall back or you do want to fall back from an enemy unit. You do run the risk of being locked in combat with them if you don't beat that leadership test. And of course, a savvy opponent can potentially use that to their advantage if they have some leadership kind of reducing shenanigans or anything like that. As a Space Marine Master, he does obviously come with an Iron Halo, granting him a 4-up invulnerable, which again is a huge boost to his survivability, being able to ignore wound rolls of 1 to 3, and then having a 50-50 chance of ignoring any that do get through or that push past your armor save, means that even the heaviest firepower will only have a relatively small chance of punching through an unsaved wound, and as we will see in a bit, even that isn't the full extent of Belial's defensive abilities. He is a Terminator character, so he also has the teleport strike ability, meaning that instead of setting him up on the battlefield, he can be put in the teleportarium and deep strike onto the board from turn 2, as long as he's 9 inches away from your enemy. And for a pure Deathwing list, with their relatively slow 5-inch movement, this can really be a life-saving ability and help you to get that board control, as well as bring the fight right to your enemy's line instead of just being shot off the board as you slowly advance up. I would say it's well worth putting at least a few units in Teleport Strike if you are running Deathwing, and with his aura buffs like Rites of Battle, bringing down Belial and a few squads can mean that you can do some horrific damage on the turn they arrive, so this really is a handy little ability to have in your back pocket. Finally, for his unique abilities, Belial comes with the Parrying Blade special rule. To show off his unmatched skill with a sword, he causes enemies in melee range to suffer a -1 to hit penalty when they swing against him. So in addition to his 2-up save, Inner Circle, and 4-up invulnerable, your opponent will go from probably hitting on 2s or 3s to hitting on 3s or 4s, if not worse, giving you a much greater chance of avoiding that damage from an enemy unit, and pretty much making Belial an even more difficult model to remove from the board. And while we're here, we may as well cover this. The last part of what makes Belial such an absolute pain to remove is in the Warlord trait he must take if you bring him as your Warlord. He automatically comes with the Inexorable trait, and what that does is that every time an attack is allocated to him, the damage characteristic of that attack is reduced by 1 to a minimum of 1. So not only is he toughness 4 with 6 wounds, protected by a 2-up save and a 4-up invulnerable, but he can also never be wounded on less than a 4+, and if he's in melee, your enemy has a -1 to hit penalty against him, and then even after all that, if a wound does get through, you reduce its damage by 1, making things like power fists and those master-crafted power swords that seem to be all the rage at the moment literally half as threatening as they were before. It honestly does make Belial unbelievably tanky, and even dedicated combat characters will have to roll really well to get through his 6 wounds before Belial can strike them back. And on the topic of Belial striking them back, he can do that in a very strong way. First up, we'll cover his more boring weapon, which is a master-crafted Stormbolter, and I mean I say boring, but he can still put out a potential 8 wounds with it, meaning that if the stars align, he could conceivably take out a Dreadnought in one shooting phase. I mean, let's be real, it'll never happen, but still, it would be hilarious if it did. Firing 4 shots all the time thanks to Bolted Discipline at strength 4, -1 AP and a flat 2 damage, it is a decent little extra bit of firepower to help whittle down enemy squads, or even take some pot shots at heavier things like bikes or aggressors, and even in a clutch situation, it can actually do something like take the last wound off an enemy venom. So if you manage to get an enemy venom or something down to its last wound and you have no other firepower, this should on average take that last wound off and then allow you to see all those juicy Drukhari contents spill out onto the battlefield. But of course his main damage output comes in melee, and specifically from his weapon, the Sword of Silence. Much like the other Dark Angel's Heavenfall style blades, this comes in with a +2 strength, -4 AP profile, but in its own unique twist from the others has a flat 3 damage, and also against anything that isn't a vehicle, it always wounds on an unmodified 2+. So with his 5 attacks on the charge, he will be hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, pushing pretty much everything back to either no save or it's invulnerable, and then doing a hefty 3 damage with each swing, meaning he will on average outright kill 3 toughness 5, 3 wound models like aggressors on the charge before they can even react. And being strength 6 with the weapon is also quite important because, as per his Sons of the Lion ability, being able to reroll his wounds against vehicles means that even against things like Land Raiders, where he will be wounding on 5s instead of 2s, he goes from doing about 4 wounds without rerolls to doing just under 7 with his Implacable rule, which is honestly pretty good. And by using something like 1 command point reroll, you could potentially bracket a Land Raider in 1 round of combat with him, which is, I mean, it's not bad at all, really. But despite that, his main focus is going after characters and infantry, where his always wounds on 2+ will mean that he gets through an incredible number of wounds, each doing that terrifying 3 damage a pop. As far as stratagems for Belial go, a potentially game-changing one is Intractable. It won't always be the most obvious one to use, but with his inner circle restrictions, if you absolutely 100% need Belial to fall back, you can use this and he automatically passes the 2d6 roll. As I said, this isn't the most flashy or even a stratagem that you will use often, but in some certain niche situations, this could well be the difference between winning and losing a game, and when you absolutely cannot fail that 2d6 roll, this could really come in handy. Tactical Appraisal is also fantastic for Belial, allowing you to choose a doctrine in the command phase, and it's active for that unit until your next command phase. So if you know you will be getting a charge off, or you will be getting charged by a scary character or an enemy with more than 8 wounds, you can pop yourself straight into the Assault Doctrine to get those rerolls from Implacable and really make your enemy think twice about whether they want to get into combat with Belial at all. He can also make really great use of Only in Death Does Duty End with his frankly terrifying 3 damage attacks. If you do get charged by, say, Drazar, and he does manage to get through all of your defenses and kill Belial before you can swing, for 2 command points, you can make sure that your enemy at least suffers the loss of one of their characters before you take Belial off the table. And I would also mention things like Deathwing Assault and Fury of the First because they are Terminator specific stratagems. But if we're being totally honest, as they affect a full unit, you're much better off using them on the squads that you will almost certainly be teleporting in alongside Belial. Getting that +1 to hit and +1 to wound from each will 100% be more effective on a squad of 10 Deathwing Terminators with 2 Cyclone missile launchers than on Belial's Stormbolter. I think that overall, Belial does fill a spot in a Deathwing list. Deep striking him in with a big squad or 2 means that you really can get up in your enemy's face, and by giving your Terminator squads that bubble of reroll 1s to hit, and then using things like Deathwing Assault and Fury of the First, you can potentially have a load of Terminators firing a heck of a lot of Stormbolter and crack missiles at your enemy, hitting on 2s in some cases, getting +1 to wound, and then rerolling 1s to hit as well, meaning that even against the toughest targets, you will be getting through a solid number of wounds, and should be able to clear out your enemy lines. He is also an absolute character killer, and aside from 1 or 2 really killy characters, I think he can go toe to toe with pretty much any HQ in the game and stand a good chance of coming out on top. His incredible survivability, as well as his very decent damage output in melee, means that as you move up alongside a Deathwing squad or a Deathwing Knight squad, it will give them a hugely powerful beat stick to help take down any enemy units or characters that try to challenge them, all the while giving them some fairly decent reroll buffs along the way. His main downside is that he realistically does need to be teleported in or put into a Land Raider, but let's be honest, even with the recent price drop, a Land Raider is not an effective thing to bring to the tabletop, so it's effectively deep striking him in or foot slogging him. And if you're running pure Deathwing, I just honestly don't think that foot slogging is going to win you many games. The ability to move around objectives and gain that crucial board control will just mean that you will lose against a faster army on the primary objective 9 out of 10 times, and that will cost you a lot of games. So I think in general, he is really useful and he is quite powerful, but I don't think he's absolutely mandatory in a Deathwing list. I honestly do think that a Terminator Librarian or a Terminator Chaplain brings along some just as solid, if not more useful, spells and abilities, and whilst not quite as killy, if you want a cheaper HQ option for your Deathwing, then the Strike Master can come along as a much more palatable 95 point investment rather than Belial's 140. He is good, don't get me wrong, and I don't think that a Deathwing list would be hugely hamstrung by bringing him. I just don't think he brings quite as many useful abilities and buffs and skills as, say, Samael does for the Ravenwing or Azrael does for the Dark Angels in general. And so from that perspective, a Deathwing force may be better served by the litanies or psychic powers that come alongside the previously mentioned Librarian or Chaplain. But what do you think? Is Belial a worthwhile addition to a Deathwing force? And if not, what else would you like to see added to him that would make him a good choice to take? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I will catch you later, guys.